My son was purchasing a new house, and I offered $100,000, which was half of my life savings. I asked just one simple question: where will I live after you move? The look my daughter-in-law gave me was icy and filled with disdain. I merely smiled and did something they didn't expect. Hey, Reddit. When my son shared that he was buying a new house, I smiled instinctively. That's what mothers do, we smile first and worry later. It's perfect, he said, his voice full of excitement as he showed me pictures on his phone. High ceilings, white walls, large windows, and a backyard big enough for barbecues and kids I hadn't even met yet. I nodded, truly happy for him. He had worked hard, putting in long hours and late nights, earning promotions he rarely mentioned unless I asked. I felt proud of him quietly, as I always had. Then he hesitated. There's just one thing, he added. We're a bit short on the down payment. I already knew what he was going to say. I had been waiting for this moment my whole life. Since my husband passed away, I had been saving every spare dollar, making small sacrifices, skipping vacations and upgrades, just letting the amount grow in an account for the kids. Half my life savings was there, and without even checking the exact figure, I responded, I can help. His shoulders relaxed instantly. How much, he asked cautiously, as if he didn't want to seem greedy. 100,000, I replied. The words felt heavy but not wrong. That's a lot, he said, eyes wide. It's half of what I have, I answered calmly. He looked at me in disbelief, then smiled and hugged me. We decided to discuss details over dinner, my son, his wife, and I. I dressed nicely, opting for a simple blouse and pearl earrings I hadn't worn in years. I wanted to appear composed and supportive, like a mother who wasn't asking for anything in return. But I had one question, just one. Dinner started off polite, too polite. My daughter-in-law sat across from me, her posture straight and her smile fixed. She talked about the neighborhood, the schools, and how the house would grow with them. I listened. When there was a lull, I asked, where will I live when you move? The table fell silent. I hadn't raised my voice or made accusations. I had simply asked. My daughter-in-law looked at me, and I will never forget that look, cold, measured, almost disgusted, as if I had said something inappropriate. My son cleared his throat. Mom, we haven't really thought about that yet. I nodded slowly. I understand. His wife didn't say a word, she just kept staring at me, lips pressed together, eyes sharp. Suddenly, I realized something clearly: I wasn't part of their future in the way I had imagined. My question hadn't offended them, it had inconvenienced them. We finished dinner without mentioning it again. On the drive home, I replayed that look in my mind, not anger or shock, just disgust, as if the idea of me existing beyond a check was uncomfortable. The following days were quiet, too quiet. My son called to update me on inspections, paperwork, timelines. He sounded relieved, energized, and grateful, but he didn't ask about me, not once. I didn't bring it up because I was deep in thought. I carefully reviewed my finances, every statement, account, and plan I had made quietly and responsibly for decades. I contemplated the future, aging, and what happens when you stop being useful. I realized something unsettling: I had been planning my life around people who hadn't planned for me at all. When we met again to finalize things, my daughter-in-law was overly warm. She thanked me repeatedly, calling me generous and amazing, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. I smiled back because I had already made a decision. I didn't transfer anything that day. I told them I needed more time. They agreed too easily, which confirmed my feelings. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the same one I had shared with my husband for 37 years. The walls held memories, the furniture provided comfort. For the first time, I wondered who would decide my future if I didn't. I didn't sleep much, nor did I cry. I just thought about dignity, independence, and what happens when love becomes conditional. The next morning, my daughter-in-law texted me, checking in. Let us know when you're ready to move forward. Ready? Like I was just a step in their process. I replied politely, soon. Then I made a call, not to my son or my bank, but to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. By the end of the week, my plan was in motion: quiet, legal, irreversible, with no confrontation or drama, just preparation. When my son called again, excited and hopeful, I listened patiently. I told him I loved him, and I meant it. But I was learning that love didn't mean sacrificing my future for someone else's comfort, not anymore, not like that. I smiled when we said goodbye because what they thought was generosity had been a test, and what they didn't expect was that I would choose myself. But they didn't know that yet, not until the next conversation, when the truth finally came to light. That was the moment everything I had quietly planned began to unfold. I didn't tell my son what I was doing, not at first. I spent the next few weeks moving through my days, smiling during his calls, listening as he talked about inspections and closing dates, nodding as if nothing had changed. Externally, I was still the same supportive mother, the helpful, reliable one. Inside, I was doing something I had never done before: planning for myself. The call I made that night led to another, and then another a financial advisor, a lawyer, a realtor, people who treated me as if my future mattered, not as an afterthought or inconvenience. For the first time since my husband died, I voiced my needs. I need to make sure I'm secure. No one flinched or looked offended, they just nodded and asked practical questions. That alone indicated how long I had been in the wrong emotional space. When my son finally asked about the money again, his tone was careful. "Mom, the sellers are asking for confirmation soon." "I know," I said gently. "I've been thinking." There was a pause. "About what?" "About my future," I replied. Another pause, longer this time. "Well, we can discuss that later," he said. "Right now, the house, that is my future," I interrupted quietly. He didn't argue, but he also didn't respond. In that silence, I felt something subtle: clarity. We met a few days later at my house. My daughter-in-law arrived smiling, bringing pastries warm and pleasant in a way that felt rehearsed. She complimented my home, the furniture, and the photos on the walls. I noticed how carefully she avoided looking at the hallway that led to the bedrooms. We sat at the table where I had paid bills for decades, where my husband had once read the newspaper every morning. "I've decided not to give you the money," I said calmly. The air shifted instantly. My son blinked. "What?" "I won't be contributing to the house," I repeated. "Not that amount. Not in this way." My daughter-in-law's smile faded. "But you already offered," she said quickly. "We planned around it." "I understand," I replied. "That's why I wanted to be honest as soon as I could." My son leaned forward. "Mom, this changes everything." "It changes mine too," I nodded. Questions came fast after that. "What about family? Helping your children? Trust?" I listened without raising my voice. Then I said something I had never allowed myself to express before: "Where will I live?" And no one answered. My son opened his mouth and then closed it. My daughter-in-law crossed her arms. "We assumed you'd be independent." "I am," I said. "That's exactly why I'm making this choice." She looked at me as if she didn't recognize me, and maybe she didn't. The conversation ended stiffly. They left feeling disappointed, frustrated, and confused. I sat alone at the table afterward, hands folded and heart racing, not with regret, but with relief. The next months were quiet, painful at times, lonely at times, but also grounding. I sold my house not in haste or under pressure, but thoughtfully. I moved into a smaller place by choice: one floor, big windows, and a garden I could tend myself. I took trips I had postponed for years. Nothing extravagant, just enough to remind myself that I was still alive, capable, and deserving of comfort. My son visited less frequently. When he did, something had shifted. He asked before assuming and listened more than he spoke. He no longer talked about my money as if it were already gone. One afternoon, months later, he came alone. "I didn't realize how scared you must have been," he admitted quietly, contemplating the future. I didn't correct him. Fear had been part of it, but it wasn't the whole truth. "I wasn't scared of being alone," I said. "I was scared of being invisible." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. "It wasn't perfect, but it was real." Epilogue *. 1 year later, they bought a different house, smaller and more within their means. I visited often, but on my terms. I had my own place, my own life, and my own security, and I slept better because of it. Here's what I learned: the truth came too late, but it wasn't too late. Helping your children should never mean sacrificing your dignity. Love doesn't require erasing yourself from the future. When people see your savings before they see you, it's time to step back. I realized that asking, "Where will I live?" wasn't selfish, it was responsible. The cold look I received that night wasn't rejection, it was information that saved me. A mother's love should be generous, yes, but never at the expense of her safety, autonomy, or worth. I didn't stop being a good mother, I just stopped being an invisible one. And this is where the story ends.